I've been telling people for 10, 20 years that 2020 was the big year where the greatest difficulties were shown astrologically for the planet and governments and finances and everything. I didn't know what it would be. It could have been a collapse of the dollar. It could have been the icebergs melting. It could have been a massive earthquake. It could have been a great plague.
You're listening to the Feed Your Wild podcast, a conscious lifestyle show about all things nourishing for your body, mind, and soul. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and join me for candid conversations with changemakers, exploring health and wellness, food as medicine, intuition and spirituality, and nature-based practices that will transform your health and feed all parts of your wild self. Welcome back to Feed Your Wild. I'm your host, Vanessa Rodriguez, a functional nutritionist, Akashic record reader, and intuitive nourishment guide. And I'm so glad you are here. If you are new, welcome. You all are in for a treat today. We have a mega episode today with Judith Hill, renowned and internationally recognized astrologer, researcher, and author. This 2-hour-long conversation that this ended up being with Judith is like totally jam-packed throughout the entire thing with resources and insights. And Judith is such a wealth of knowledge. It's crazy how much, she's really gone deep in the weeds with all of this. This is her life's work, literally since age 3, being a second-generation astrologer. And even for those of you who are not into astrology, aren't familiar with astrology, not sure what you think about astrology or your opinion on it, I guarantee you're going to find something interesting, if not fascinating, within this conversation with Judith. And she is also one to always receive people who are curious or even skeptics and challengers of astrology with open arms, to have a really grounded discussion around it. And she's been affiliated and done a lot of research with studies having to do with astrology and her own personal research, working with who knows how many clients, probably thousands at this point. And so she has a very unique perspective on all of this. And today we are talking all about medical astrology. Interestingly, I connected with Judith. I knew I wanted to have her on because I had been diving into some of her work and her books, which I have connected in through Sage Popham, who, if you haven't heard his podcast episode on Feed Your Wild, that one is episode 72, Evolutionary Herbalism, Tending to the Inner Cosmos with Holistic Plant Medicine. That was another incredible one. He's got an amazing book with the namesake, Evolutionary Herbalism, as well. Seja has worked with Judith, has been a student of Judith, and so I also had an assistant, an intern, who was diving deep into Judith's work as well. And so it's just so fun to have her on finally. And we had our discussion at the very beginning of this whole coronavirus COVID-19 occurrence and situation. So it was really timely because here we're talking about medical astrology, mapping out the individual and collective health trends right at a time when we have pretty much an unprecedented event that's happening globally. And we're seeing a lot of the effects here. So as you heard in the intro audio clip, we get into a discussion around coronavirus and Judith's take on, from an astrological perspective, what is going on and mapping out coronavirus according to the astrological chart and influences. And of course, we also cover what medical astrology is in its most basic sense. Judith walks us through the various uses historically of medical astrology, how medical astrology was actually one of the first primary ways of using astrology, and it was done by doctors for many years. And we also see this in so many indigenous traditions as well. So she walks us through a brief history of astrology, her journey, beginning with her astrology lesson from her father at 3 years old, and also getting into the nitty-gritty of how to apply and utilize medical astrology in our everyday life. We look at the primary and fundamental elements that you need to know in order to get started with using medical astrology, how various planets and astrological signs influence and impact various biological processes and body zones and areas. We look at, quote, malefic planets such as Saturn and Mars, and why those are really two biggies that we want to know how they influence and where they are in our own natal chart in order to inform us around predispositions or possibilities of disease. Judith also speaks into how the moon influences our health, and not just related to our moon cycles, which I feel so many people are plugged into and becoming aware of, especially for those who bleed, but really looking at the nuances with the energetics of the moon and why you want to add to the body on a waxing moon and get rid of things when the moon is waning. So Judith goes into more detail on that. We explore various aspects of my own chart, which I couldn't help myself. I had my chart ready just so we can kind of ground it into some real life examples and exploration. So we look at how Saturn in Libra in my chart is relating to issues that I'm actually experiencing. And Judith has some potential antidotes for that. Judith also gives us a ton of case studies and examples to really demonstrate how she's using medical astrology to assess and inform. I mean, there's so many different uses for medical astrology. She's going to go over all of those. She even speaks into Bernie Sanders, his natal chart, and why she really would love to have a talk with him in calming down. So that's a pretty funny one, but I guarantee you're going to see the utility of medical astrology. If you are totally new, I want to encourage you to have your notepad ready if you can. You know, obviously, if you're driving, maybe just take some mental notes and pause and come back to it later. But honestly, like, you can literally take a ton of notes while listening to this particular episode. It's kind of like a mini class that she's giving, Medical Astrology 101. She goes over how each of the astrological signs really impact our health and which body zones and areas they rule, so things to look at. But again, if you're super new, the first place to start, and maybe you might want to do this prior to listening to the podcast or right after, so you take your notes and you can go do this, go to the websites that I have in the show notes. So there's a couple of different astrological websites that you could go to get your natal chart done and print it out so that you can walk through and notice what some of the elements that Judith speaks into, for example, looking at where Saturn falls in your chart or where Mars is influencing, and just getting a sense in general around your natal chart if you haven't done that before. It's really fun and enlightening. I feel like it's something as a practitioner that has been so useful for me in understanding my own health, as well as clients and those that I have supported the deeper and deeper I get into this work. One of the areas that I thought was so fascinating that we touch in on is astrology for fertility. Judith, in her own words, is the father of many babies in that She's had around a 90% success rate in fertility in the clients that came to her who are having fertility challenges. Fascinating discussion here around ovulation and how there's actually astrological fertility moments that people in the medical field aren't aware of or don't talk about. And so it's outside of the paradigm that we have around ovulating just once a month and these rhythms that we have. So that's something I feel like is really pertinent for anyone who might be experiencing challenges with fertility right now. And Judith does take consultations, so you will learn about how to access all of that. Judith also points out, in terms of the coronavirus and collective health trends in this time, some primary trigger dates that we need to pay attention to and look at. So she gives us specifics on that. And at the time of this recording, we would have passed one of those dates already, but we have a couple of other phases coming up. So I think it's really interesting to look at those trends and those dates, and also seeing how the things that she's seeing on an astrological plane being impacted, how that actually manifests and looks in real life. So we are doing this real time, and I encourage you to listen to this episode in its entirety if you want to check that out, because she really kind of speaks into coronavirus and COVID-19 events later in this podcast recording. Again, Judith provides us with incredible resources, books to check out and read, as well as offerings that she has. She is incredibly prolific in her writing, so she's got many books that we have linked up on the webpage in the show notes for this particular episode. She also has an online program, Medical Astrology 101. So for those of you who want to go deeper, geek out on this and apply it to your own life, or if you're a practitioner, really start to think about how you can integrate it into your body of work, then I highly recommend you check that out. I myself have not done her Medical Astrology 101 course, but you can believe that I plan on it at some point. So I encourage you to check out all of those resources that we got for you and the plethora of value that she has on her own website. Another resource that I want to call your attention to, because the timing of it couldn't be more perfect, is a free Astro Herbalism mini course. This is being offered through Evolutionary Herbalism. That is Seja Popham's school, the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. And this mini course is pretty phenomenal. If anybody knows Seja, you know that he does not hold back any value. He doesn't hold back anything with these free offerings. And so this Astro Herbalism mini course, Bridging Plants and Planets with Herbalism and Medical Astrology, is a free online training program with 3 videos. And he goes deep into a lot of the fundamentals and basics that we need to know to begin to work with Astro Herbalism. It's a phenomenal complement to everything that you're going to be hearing today. And it just so happens that he's offering that right now. So if you are listening to this podcast episode on the day that it is actually released, March 23rd, 2020, then you can access the Astro Herbalism mini course for free. I'll make sure to have that link in the show notes. And if you are listening to this afterward, there's a chance that you can actually check out his full program, Astro Herbalism. I cannot recommend his full program more highly. I think he is a phenomenal teacher and just really provides a lot of information around the physical and spiritual medical components of plants to heal the roots of disease through Astro Herbalism. So for those of you who are interested in medical astrology, I know you're going to geek out on that. Make sure to check out that link in my show notes as well. You can also go to wildlyrooted.com/Astro Herbalism, all one word, and that'll take you there too. I really feel this interview is just a breath of fresh air, and it sort of helps me to ground, even though we're really looking at this cosmic perspective and astrological perspective that seems so big and possibly airy and out there. But the way that Judith brings it into life and really the utility of this in a very mundane, practical way. And when I say mundane, I mean of this earth, like a real embodied way of practicing astrology, I think is so helpful in these times of real uncertainty, feeling the fear, being in the unknown. We at least have a bit of a map and signal that we can look at to give us little bite sizes of information or a sense of what is coming our way and what is happening right now. So in this way, I feel that medical astrology is a beautiful pathway into this understanding of this interconnectedness and the unknowingness that we live in, that can be really calming for our nervous system and also helpful in a very real way in our own life. All right, I don't want to keep you any longer. I am sending you so much love in this time, and I know you're really going to get a lot out of this episode. Let us know what you think about it. All right, here we go with Judith Hill. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Feed Your Wild. Today, we have Judith Hill. Judith is an award-winning author of 13 books, including the classics Medical Astrology, A Guide to Planetary Pathology, The Astrological Body Types, and Vocational Astrology. She's recently published Medical Astrology for Health Practitioners, which I have and I love, and Medical Astrology in Action. She produces the Renaissance Medicine Conference and created the course Medical Astrology 101. She's a chartered herbalist with Dominion Herbal College, a teacher at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbal Medicine, and has provided workshops for Kepler College. An internationally recognized researcher, Hill internationally published significant statistical research on astrogenetics and astroseismology, and has served as the educational director for the San Francisco NCGR and as the private assistant to the great physicist Arthur Young at the Institute of the Study of Consciousness. She's one of the longest practicing full-time astrological consultants in the world, and we have her on today. I feel so blessed, Judith, to have you.
Hello, Vanessa. I'm just thrilled to be here too. So this is a meeting of minds today.
Yes. Before we hopped on, we're having a pre-chat of just how incredible it has been, this surge in interest in astrology. And we see this at all different levels. Obviously, we see this in mainstream and, sort of pop astrology, if you will. But nearly every person I know knows at least their sun sign. And there seems to be a growing thirst for a deeper understanding of how we can use astrology as it relates to our life. And as a health practitioner, our health. I see this very much with a lot of the clients that I'm seeing. And so I was so excited when I was first introduced to you and your work through Saja Popham of Evolutionary Herbalism, who we also had on the podcast. So I'll make sure to link that episode up in the show notes. And I got bit by the bug, Judith. I really did. I got your books, and it's so fascinating, but it can also be overwhelming. And I'd love to start off with just sort of setting down the foundation for folks of what is medical astrology. I think people have sort of a basic understanding of what astrology is, but I'd love to hear, what is medical astrology for those who maybe haven't heard about it before?
Oh, very good. Well, one of the first things people should know is that medical astrology was one of the very first, if not the first, uses for astrology. It goes way back to ancient Greek times. We don't have time for a history lesson, but before Christ. And so the uses are many, and it's the physical energetics that the planets create. So in the old days, the charts were not viewed so much for their psychological outcome as they are now. They were seen as cold, hot, moist, wet, normalizing, neutral, and how they affected the body zones, which were ruled by the 12 signs. You have 12 body zones. So you have actually a very comprehensive system that was the mainstay of Western medicine with herbalism and patient examination until 1666. In fact, the physicians had to have passed their exams in medical astrology to become physicians. So it's the medical applications through energetics. One might say it's like a template of your horoscope, your birth chart, natal chart is a template of the unseen vibratory forces that are informing your physical body. And it's a microscope, a telescope into those energies that our present medical tradition no longer uses, curiously. So that's just a beginning answer on what it is. And it's very, very useful.
And one can intuit its utility, and I think that especially envisioning the physicians of the past using medical astrology to work with their patients. What can medical astrology really do for us today? So let's say the layperson even who might be interested in astrology and starting to go deeper as it relates to how astrology impacts their physiology or their health. What are some ways that they can actually use medical astrology to help them?
Oh my goodness, there's so many ways. I'll list some, and it's a wonderful question, Vanessa. So the one is the selection of safe surgery dates. Very, very good use. Another is selection of dates for enhanced fertility. I've done a lot of that. Both of these, they work very well. Another is to find the seat of chronic disease. Where does it really begin? Another is to identify the seat of inflammation in the body. The diagnosing and cause of mysterious symptoms, comprehending adjunct causes that are contributive to a disease process, defining now this is important, defining the type, amount, and strengths of the innate vital force of your patient, so that you don't just assume they should be released from the hospital. Choosing the best date to release from the hospital, knowing when the patient is ready to do so. In the old days, it was used quite a bit for identifying the length and illness and mortal potential of an illness because people frequently died by 30. Assessing doctor-patient harmony. Have you ever worked with a patient or patients with a doctor for months? No success at all, even getting worse, and in comes somebody and heals you in 2 days. So there is that, the exchange of vital force between doctor and patient. Selecting appropriate herbs for treatment. That's very important. Identifying a patient's innate weaknesses and strengths. Also, this is so important, and I hope I'm not going on too long, Vanessa, but the assessing of etiological category. In the old days, they had many, many etiologies which we threw out. I call these the lost etiologies. But in a general way, is the disease of physical, psychological, supernatural, or astrological origins? Astrology can cause disease. Understanding the patient's special emotional needs. The best time for planting, harvest, decocting, and administering herbs. This is a big one. I've used it many times, alerting you to when a problem is far more dangerous than you would otherwise know. So, sometimes a person, I've stories about this, looks like they're going to die in 3 days and they're wanting to postpone the surgery and go off on vacation. Determining the onset of menopause, menarche, selecting the right surgeon. Sometimes people give me a list of surgeons, and you'll find one who is their dedicated enemy on the astral plane. You don't want to choose that surgeon. Another one will be very protective to them. Just 2 more. Being alert for strange idiosyncrasies and reactions to medicine in your patient. And one other, although there's endless ones, being prepared for collective health trends, because you can see, what's going to be popular that year. Is it going to be knees? Is it going to be nerves? And it will be. and to get ready for those trends in people. So that's a brief answer to the many, many wonderful uses, as well as just personal upkeep, knowing the type of vital force you have.
I mean, honestly, Judith, I feel like each one of those could be its own episode. There's
Yeah.
so much richness in all of that. And it makes me wonder, just kind of briefly backtracking a bit, how and why did this go out of practice? I know this might get into
Ah,
historical territory, but
yes.
I'd love to know what happened.
I'll be brief, but I can give you some ideas. About 1666, at the very end of the 17th century, with the Renaissance, Harvey was discovering things. They discovered the blood flow and they discovered the nervous system, and they were drawing pictures of it. And they found that some of the organs were thought, were like the liver was not producing the body's blood and so forth. And so we have the besmirchment of previous knowledge. All of a sudden, they became enchanted with all of ancient knowledge and went crazy for new knowledge. But there was something else. The university trained physicians who were sauntering around in ermine cloaks and riding horses and speaking Latin and making a lot of money. And even as early as the 1400s, they petitioned Parliament to ban all female physicians, and they began attacking herbalists, and they began forming their own system. And King Henry had to step in with his herbalist charter and save the herbalists. But astrology then started getting attacked by science more than the church, actually. It was still used for medical astrology, considered just fine use of astrology, didn't interfere with God's will or anything. But they started to besmirch and make fun of their own traditional system, which is just as rich and wonderful as traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine. They started to make fun of it, hide it, bury it, with a very, very frenzied campaign. And it went underground for years. But still, maverick physicians continued to practice up to the present day. And in my little book for health practitioners, I have a doctor's testimony section with some of their amazing quotes. So it never, ever died out. But there was even a clinic here in Portland for years that the owner of it was secretly practicing astrological medicine. And over the years, some Western doctors have contacted me for help on mystery cases. It has never died out. It just really went underground. And it became, you couldn't tell anybody you did it. But times are changing. Yes, they are.
Oh, yes. I feel there's a definite resurgence in so many of these various, wise traditions that are coming back full force. But you are truly a pioneer, I feel, in this, especially as it relates to astrology and medical astrology. And I'm curious if we could go into your personal story a bit. How did you come to discover medical astrology? And from what I remember, I believe that you're also a second generation astrologist. Is that correct?
Yes, people always ask me this, and I say the same thing. When I was a baby of 3, my father sat me on his knee, and he began teaching me astrology at that age. And then at the age of 10, he pretty much apprenticed me for 4 years, and I started my first professional readings at age 17. Age 14. Age 14. My mother died at that age, and I was a little bit on my own by 17, so I started to make some money, and I had a talent for it. But I was really into herbs. I was totally into studying herbs. But in those days, there was no career where I lived of herbalist. You just couldn't do that. So I was studying by myself and finding weird little people hiding away who knew something. But what happened was I was disenchanted with the purely psychological uses of astrology. And I was also fascinated with the fact that all the men I knew were highly skilled, but us women were not being taught these skills. We were in home ec and they were learning carpentry and electricity and everything. And so I thought, I want to do something really, really useful in the physical plane. But I seemed to just be in this astrological world. That was my world. So, how could I make astrology useful? And gradually, I would find these old books. When I was 10 years old, 11, 12, I'd get on the bus. I'd go all the way downtown alone in San Francisco to the one metaphysical bookstore. It had the best name, Fritzie Armstrong's Metaphysical Town Hall. And Fritzie Armstrong was this very, very, very old woman who always was in her slippers and a bathrobe. And she ran this bookstore. And I would go in there, I'd spend all day. They had the weirdest vibration in there. I don't know what they did, but they had these books on astrology, and I would find these old, outdated books, and I finally discovered medical astrology. Nobody else was doing it. And I started studying how to do dates for surgeries and fertility. I did a lot of people. As I say, I'm the father of many, and many, many women have gotten pregnant because of me. And because it really works. I have stories if you like stories. So then, I built it up and built it up. And then I really wanted to, my dream was the same as Cornell's dream. He writes of it in his Encyclopedia of Medical Astrology, an amazing tome. But my dream was to get this, it was so wonderful, so amazing, to get it back into the consciousness, A, of astrologers at the very least, but B, get the medical practitioners using this amazing system again, because it shows them many things that they cannot get out of traditional Western. It's the estranged spouse, and it is the predecessor of Western medicine, and it is the indigenous system of a large part of the world. So I did several medical astrology conferences, two since 1990 in Portland, Oregon, and then I started the Renaissance Medicine Conference. We did 4 years of that, and Sage spoke at every one. He was a huge hit. It was herbs, medical astrology, and alchemy. And we'd always fill it, and people would come, and then they'd spread out all around the world, and almost everybody was an herbalist or health practitioner. There'd be maybe 4 astrologers there, and everybody else was health practitioners. They wanted to know about this. And I predict, Vanessa, that within one more generation, the best of medical astrology will be back in use with at least the naturopaths, if not already. And so I went on a bit there, but you did ask the story. There it is.
Well, I think, I got chills when you just said that, Judith, because I really feel that is true. I see it in the clients who come to see me. I see it in myself and my interest and hunger for this information, and my colleagues who are also various kinds of health practitioners. I think that we were speaking prior that there's sort of a remembrance and a reclamation process that's happening here. And it's going to take a few generations, of course, for these sort of really big shifts to come back and to apply themselves as it relates to, the present time and modern times. But I also want to just take a moment to honor you and your work in really seeding that for that to happen, which has to feel really amazing just to see all of this unfold. Before we get into kind of the nitty gritty of medical astrology, how do you feel seeing sort of the blossoming of astrology today?
Well, what a lovely question. I said to Matthew Wood the other day, my work is accomplished. I can die happy, and the rest is gravy. I do feel that what my goal was in this life, to be at least one of the people, and there haven't been very many of us, one of the few people who has carried the torch and lit the fire again on the podium of this very, very, it's almost a sacred art, an amazing art, through thick and thin. And it hasn't been easy, doing this for a living my whole life in a climate where it was it was actually illegal until 1989. And I was practicing, yes, illegal in the United States and in California until 1989 to practice astrology and give readings. And they were hauling off people to jail right before they legalized it. You couldn't openly tell people what you did, and it would be considered a disreputable career, or it was immediately assumed you were a con artist, a nutcase, a wild hippie, or a fraud. And yet some of the most intelligent and sincere people were doing readings. So, I could not even get a credit card company to allow me to have a business with them just, was it 10 years ago? The two major credit card companies wouldn't allow it. They had astrology lopped in with phone sex.
Oh my
And
goodness.
if you go down to the library in Portland here, there's two huge, gigantic, file cabinets filled with vocational literature and two great big books on choices of vocations. In both of these books, astrologer is listed under entertainer. They wouldn't do that to a psychologist. And it takes 10 or 20 years to really become really good. And you have to study everything. In India, I've heard that it's an 8-year study with a 4-year apprenticeship. And you study astronomy, you study psychology, you study anthropology, you have to study everything, plus astrology. And astrology can get more and more detailed and complex. And remedials, which is another, how do you actually use this to help people? It was a very, very long haul, but I am thrilled with what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing so many young people becoming allopaths and naturopaths who are beginning to study and use medical astrology. And I'm just, yay! It's so great. You cannot believe it. Cannot believe it.
It's pretty phenomenal. And I know that folks listening are just waiting for us to drop gems on all of them around medical astrology. So let's get into it and appease them before the riots start. I think that where we could really start off, and Judith, you know better than I, so you can also steer the way, but I'm really looking at, what are sort of the primary or fundamental elements that we need to be looking at or understand when it comes to basic medical astrology. If, for whether it's the layperson or the health practitioner, are there some primary or fundamental elements we need to be looking at?
Yes, there are, and there's several, but probably the one that's going to bake your bread is Saturn. Find the sign that Saturn is in. That's all you need to do to get started. Saturn is almost always the cause of the seat of chronic disease. Not in every case, but 90% of the time. Because Saturn is cold and dry. He can trap moisture, though he can trap heat. And I say he because we don't have time for all the others.
Yeah.
And he is considered a male in this system, though there are people that would rather assign, I guess. It doesn't sound good. So I'm just going to say he, if you don't mind, for now. And correct me later. So they call him Sani in Eastern tradition. So Saturn creates hypofunction. So he limits the circulation. He causes restriction of muscles. This can limit oxygen and nutrients. Over time, we have massing of toxins. Over time, we have malnutrition. He also rules structural issues. So Saturn is a type of energy that condenses heavily towards the center. They find today he has so much pressure on him that on his surface it's 1,000 times greater pressure than at the bottom of the Earth's ocean, I believe. 100 or 1,000 times. It's huge. So he's condensing pressure. So you find that sign, and the 12 zodiac signs relate to the 12 zones of the body, and you need a chart. And all of my books have the charts that are medically oriented. So, like if Saturn's in Aries, that's the head and eyes. You might get the person's coming in with glaucoma or migraines, or you see Saturn is in Aries, you immediately know it's due to a restriction of blood flow or oxygen, or tight muscle, or something's too restricted with the skull itself or the bones. It's caused by restriction, cold, dry restriction. So you find that Saturn, and that's the first thing. If you know only that, it will immeasurably help you.
I'm curious for those listening in, because I just realized we kind of hopped in because I'm all excited and I have, pretty basic intermediate knowledge of astrology. But for those who are like, wait, houses, what? And I don't want to get into, what all of those elements are, but I think I could do a quick primer in the intro for people, but where are some places that people, if they're like, oh, how do I get my chart? Are there websites that I could go to and then they can begin to learn their chart so they can apply everything that we're going to be speaking about today?
Yeah, for the absolute beginner, and I know you're out there, don't be embarrassed. There's a number of websites that will give you your chart for free, but you need your birth time, place, date, and year. There's, I think, astro.com, there's astrodinst. Just put in a free horoscope or free birth chart, and you'll get a number of offerings. You will need, now some sites use symbols, so you need to know the symbols. My books all have a symbol sheet. Some will print it out. They'll print out Mars for you, but you're going to get a chart and you won't be able to read it. But you need to know what sign your planets are in. And once you get that chart, most novices in astrology will be able to tell you. And hopefully it'll say at the bottom, Sun in Aries, Moon in Gemini, whatever you have, it'll list it out. So sites are different. Or just have a friendly neighborhood astrologer make you a chart, and you don't really need a reading. You need to know what sign your planets are in, your rising sign, and your two lunar nodes. You want to ask them that. The two lunar nodes are very important. And you'll have the sign of your Saturn in particular. That is really what you're after at first. So I hope that helps.
That's very helpful. And so you had mentioned Saturn, and I know that many people listening in who maybe have just gone through or are going through their Saturn return are familiar with this. This is also something that's been very trendy in, pop media and culture. So do we see sort of the same effects and elements at, sort of the energies that Saturn has as relates to that time of life? And as it pertains to how it can influence our health and our body.
That's interesting. I know a lot of your listeners are probably going through their Saturn return, which often can last a whole year on either side of it. And the Saturn return basically is the time that your body becomes a finished adult. So the wisdom teeth are finishing up more or less. The brain completes growing, especially in males, around this time. And now you begin to decline. So, you reach this fullness in the body, and then you begin to spiritually mature. You separate from your parents. It's the end of youth, as in the physical. If we look at life as 4 seasons, spring, summer, and then fall and winter. So callow youth is now done, if you like to hear that or not. This is true on the timing level. Saturn waltzes in the seasons of life. He's the big timer. And the moon is our little timer. She's our monthly timer. So they're partners, and they're opposite. They rule opposite signs in the zodiac, curiously. But yeah, you don't always have certain health problems when you have your Saturn return. But it could manifest that way. In some people's charts, it would all of a sudden something's showing up that you didn't know. Saturn always makes things, it's a good, it's the word diagnostician. If you have a problem, it could show up at the Saturn return, but it doesn't always work out that way. It's more the call of adulthood and has other meanings. People usually have to choose a career if they haven't around then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get a lot of folks in consultation around their Saturn return. I feel like that's the time when people get really curious or feeling lost as well.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. They say the past is wiped away and a new life is begun at the Saturn return. This is how the old people taught. Old people are largely dying and gone now. So I was trained by them. So the past is wiped away and a new life is begun. You become an adult, and you usually have a big, big decision to make about your career. And authority hits you. Now, if you want to see how Saturn works, there's an amazing series of little movies called 7 Up, 14 Up, 21 Up, 28 Up. This filmmaker filmed the same group of 12 kids in Britain every 7 years. And so at 21, they're all lovely and charming and magnetic and sexy. When they get at their Saturn return, they look like a sack of lead hit them on the head. It's just amazing. They recover. But by the next 7 years, but they get sobered up. It's really quite funny, and you can see the effect of the Saturn return. And some people become a parent for the first time. Some people have to, there's a changing of the guard with your parents now that adolescence is greatly delayed. In my day, we were all out of the house by 17, 18, if not married. But now you're home till 30, so it's a little different. But you do, you come into a different season related to your biological parents too. But it's a very big change point, and it can last 3 years, one on either side.
Yeah, I feel like part of my, just to kind of insert a personal anecdote, part of my Saturn return was the loss of my mom, like her chronic disease and journey with breast cancer. And then, sort of my new life post her passing, which, at the time I wasn't really aware of what Saturn return was. I'd heard it, wasn't really familiar, and that I was actually going through it. Yeah, intense stuff. But thank you for breaking that down for us. You had mentioned also a wonderful example of, for example, to Saturn in the body zone of Aries and how that might affect our head. So I'm wondering, for people who are like, oh, body zones, areas, related to these different signs, could we briefly maybe walk through the different signs and what those areas are really connected to in the body?
Sure, I'll try to keep it succinct. So we have 12 signs and 12 body zones. Think of a circle of the ecliptic plane or the zodiac, and now snip it and make it a single line. So the circle becomes the human body. And so we have it was called malefics in Grecian times, but it's zodiacal man, or we could say zodiacal human, but it was always known as zodiacal man, or the great man of the zodiac, and they had lots of pictures of him, but zodiacal human. And so the top of the head, with the exclusion of the nose, through the upper jaw, not including the ears, is under Aries. And now there's a lot of other little things. Planets can co-rule parts. We can't go into that right now. So the ears, lower jaw, neck, esophagus, upper esophagus, the trachea, the vocal cords, the tongue, all under Taurus. Again, some other planets will come in. You advanced people out there, we're not going to do that right now. Gemini takes the shoulders, arms, hands, the clavicle, and some people say the clavicle is Cancer. There's some, but the upper lung and the bronchial tubes. Gemini, and the inspiration of breath. The Cancer rules the rib cage, the breasts, the stomach. It is supposed to have some governance over the pleura and the pericardium, and also the fluids of the body, the lower lung for sure, and it has a lot of influence over the posterior pituitary and probably the hypothalamus as well. The sign of Leo, the heart, the lumbar, the aorta, the major vessels around the heart, and the spinal sheaths. These are considered to be under Leo, and the wrists shared with Gemini, and you'll see why later. Virgo is a very important health sign, governing most of the upper intestinal organs, the liver, the pancreas, the upper intestine. Some say the ascending colon. Some say that's Scorpio. It also has a lot to do with the spleen and the liver, of course. The liver has some other shared rulerships. And Virgo also holds a great deal of sway over the automatic nervous system, and the half of it, I always get the parasympathetic and the sympathetic mixed up.
Me too.
The one that doesn't make you sleepy, the one that makes you alert.
Yep, sympathetic.
Thank you, Vanessa. Okay, those are Virgo, and Virgo also has some rulership over fingers with Gemini. And so then we have Libra. So Libra governs balances. It has a lot to do with kidney function, has a lot to do with ovaries, has a lot to do with acid alkaline balance, and with hormonal balances, salt balances, and a physical balance. All the balances, the chemistry of the blood. We then have Scorpio, an incredibly important health sign, governing all processes of excretion. So it governs the whole generative system, the genitals, the colon, the anal area, the rectum, sweat glands, the bladder, and the nose. Very much, Scorpios almost always have something going on with that nose. Okay, so Sagittarius, number 9. I call them body zones. I've brought that in for convenience. So body zone 9, for the healer, for the doctors, they can't relate to the romance of the names of the zodiac. So just say body zone 9 if you're that way. So body zone 9 Sagittarius, we have the hips and the thighs. The sciatic nerve has a lot to do with the central nervous system and the nerves going up and down the spine, especially the lower spinal nerves, is always implicated in spinal diseases. Also, Sagittarius has a great deal to do with the arterial blood and the expiration of the breath. So now we have Capricorn. So Capricorn governs the knees and everything about the knees, has a great deal of governance over the skin and also over the joints in general, and there's the general skeletal structure. Very much Capricorn shares some rulership with Saturn and Taurus. Now you have, and nails and cuticles and ligaments and tendons are also under Saturn, Capricorn's ruler. You often see some issues there with Capricorns. Aquarius, the most unusual and amazing of the 12. I consider myself an Aquarian specialist, and they're always noted for their problems that people can't diagnose. Strange spasms, fatigue, all kinds of things. So Aquarius governs the weird, little-known electrical system of the body, and in concert with Leo, which governs the heart, which is an electrical center. Aquarius also governs the ankles. So we know adjusting the ankles can influence the Leo center opposite the heart. Some kind of electrical center down in the ankles. The astrologers know this. So the shin, the whole lower leg, is under Aquarius. And what was called the quality of the blood. Now, the ancients did not know all of the blood constituents, but I've noticed almost all Aquarians at some point in their life suffer anemia at some point. And if you get a case of some kind of blood illness like leukemia, or blood cells are shaped weirdly, very, very low blood pressure too, very often the sign of Aquarius is involved. It doesn't mean you're born in that sign. You could have Saturn there. The veins. The veins are under Aquarius and Venus. Aquarians are always prone to venous issues. Now we have Pisces, the most mysterious of signs. Governs sleep, the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system. Pisces is a great sleeper. You'll notice this in your Pisces friends. It governs the feet, but also probably the intracellular matrix, the whole communication of the fluids in the body. And it governs, with Cancer, the lymphatic system. You'll read in the books that Pisces governs the lymphatics. Well, Cancer governs the thoracic duct. So Cancer is very implicated in toxic lymphatic buildups, as is Pisces. And you also have Virgo ruling. Virgo rules the immune system in general, but these things need to be broken down, and Virgo rules the spleen. And there are little lymphatic vessels in the intestine. So we know that Virgo has a lot to do with this. When you get autoimmune diseases, you almost always have a hyperactive Virgo and a hyperactive Mars, because it is the great defender. It's the attacker, goes after things. So that's the simplest breakdown. I've left a great deal off. In my books, I give bigger lists. If you really want to get into the ruler of every single vertebra and every single muscle, get Cornell's Medical Encyclopedia of Astrology, unabridged version.
Perfect. Judith, this is such an amazing beginning, I think, for people. This is a lot of information to start with. And I want to sort of bring this together and maybe ground it into like an actual example or a case study so that people can begin to understand? For example, we just touched on Saturn. I know that there are some other, I guess you could say, unfavorable influencer planets
Yeah.
that we could touch on as well. But let's say using Saturn as an example, is there a case that, you can kind of recall or touch on that sort of illustrates everything that you just mapped out for us in like a grounded, example of what that could look like for a person?
Oh, yeah. I've several. Gosh. Well, let's take Saturn and Aries. Now, we have to be very careful here. If you have Saturn and Aries in the audience, please do not get upset or worried. This doesn't mean you'll have any problem there. If Saturn's good, it just means strength in the area. It's only when it goes pathological and if you're having symptoms, and then you treat it accordingly. There's plenty of herbs and treatments that will relax, moisten, and warm that area. Don't self treat. You always have to go to your professional. I have to legally say that. So now, I have several examples from history of that. Let's see what you can tell, first of all. I had a client, I think she did give me permission to discuss this. I had a client who had Saturn in Aries, which shows some kind of pressure in the head. But she also had a great buildup of other planets in Aries and in Taurus, the sign of the lower brain, the ears. And there was so much pressure in the chart. Any astrologer would have seen it. She didn't tell me anything. I never met her. And I was on the phone with her. And I asked, I think she was doing some other kind of reading. We weren't doing anything along this line. I think I said, I said, excuse me, do you have glaucoma? And she said, yes, I do. How did you know that? And I said, well, and do you have any pressure in your ears? And she says, I've burst my eardrum 3 times out of pressure. I'm always having tremendous pressure in my head and my ears. So this is just an example of what any garden variety medical astrologer who's had enough years can do. There's also, I was thinking, Betty Davis died of strokes, and she was in the hospital for something else. The great, she's got Betty Davis eyes. If you know that song by Ken Carnes.
Yep.
And she had Sun and Saturn in Aries. Now the Sun is also your brain. She also had a terrible buildup in Taurus, so she showed extreme buildup in the head. Now Ram Dass, who just recently died, I hope my memory serves me well here. He was in Aries with Saturn in Aries and Mars opposing it, making it far worse on an angle. And he had a big stroke in his life. So those are 2 examples. Now, there is something important, Vanessa. There's 2 ways medical astrology is used. One is in the natal pattern to preempt problems. So you people with Saturn and Aries out there can get busy and preempt some problems. The other is to see what's happening right now. And that's why I wrote the book, Medical Astrology in Action, for the little more advanced astrologer or even the pro, all levels above beginning. And it goes into all of what's happening right now, because you could be minding your own business as usual, and along comes Saturn, and he sits on top of your Venus for a year. Whoops, there goes your libido. I know you young women are very concerned with this. Or if you're old, along comes menopause. Or your skin starts to get dry. Or if you're a man, you start to bald. Why is this? Because Saturn will slow down or shut off what it's crossing. So the estrogen goes way down. Well, knowing this is a big help. And especially when you look at the sign. Or say for the guys, you're minding your own business, and here comes Saturn, sits right on your Mars. Uh-oh, suddenly a bout of impotence. Or suddenly, you'll feel like, now it can be very good for strengthening muscles, but sometimes it can cause an injury if you're overdoing it. All of a sudden, it's teaching you to slow down. or it's shutting off some blood flow to the muscles, you better start warming up before your workout. Or maybe you get anemic. Maybe the red blood cells go down. Testosterone will go down. Everything ruled by Mars. So this is very, very, very useful to know what's happening in the sky. And the third way we use it is for collective health trends. So we have your individual predisposition in your natal chart, then what's happening right now when you're about your life, and oh, why am I feeling so tired this week, or why are my feet hurting all of a sudden? I did solve a famous case of poisoning using medical astrology. I don't know if you want me to tell that story.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I've told it a lot. Everybody loves that story. I have permission. But I had a lady come, and she was a health practitioner. She was very, very, very ill, even to the point of, threat to her life, and losing weight and nauseous, and nobody could find anything. So I looked at her chart. She'd been to something like 5 doctors. And there's Neptune, the planet of hidden poisons, sitting in the sign Aquarius, the sign of the air, right on her ascendant, which is a big body spot in the chart. What's your rising sign? The ascendant is that. And it was on what we call the North Node, which is a portal where energy enters. And I said, I think you're being poisoned through the air. And she admits that she thought I was a nut, and she left. And she called me, a month or 2 later, and she said, you were right. None of the doctors could get this. She said, I would be probably dead if some workmen didn't come in, and they discovered that she had a carbon monoxide leak. Now, the only reason she wasn't dead was that she slept with her window open.
Oh my
And
goodness.
secret poisoning through the air. And the doctors couldn't see this because they didn't have her chart to see into what hidden could be going, it's very good for these mystery cases. So there's some, I regaled you with some stories. I could do that all day.
Yeah, we would love like a whole nother episode of just case studies,
Yeah.
Well, also, Judith, I just want to take a quick pause here. I want to honor your time. There's so much more that we could get into, and I still have questions, but I just wanted to see, are you okay to go over time?
Very okay. And before we do that, I wanted to make sure I said this, but as everybody knows, the great, wonderful NORWAC conference filled up early. So, there's no more room unless people are canceling. So you might want to still check in. But my workshop, Let's Read Charts, Medical Astrology, Let's Read Charts. It's on Friday. It's, I think, 3 hours. It's open, and if you're in the Seattle area, you can come to that workshop. Don't think you can't get in. So I just wanted to let people know that.
Yes, thank you. I think that there's a lot of listeners in the area who would be very interested. And of course, everything that you're mentioning, including resources and books and the conference, I'll make sure to have those links in the show notes. So for anybody
Good.
who's interested, click that link to the episode for the website, and those will be in the resources section.
And one more thing I wanted to say, because we were talking about the case studies, I have 82 field notes or little case studies in medical astrology in action.
I love it. I'm almost like, Judith, what don't you have available for us? It's so great. Well, I kind of wanted to touch on, and hearing some of these stories, which are just phenomenal. Some may view medical astrology as fatalistic, and I think you touched a bit on this already, but I know that there are folks that question, how to reconcile the predeterminism with the flexibility and the ability to change one's fate and one's health, and to, take preemptive action. So I think we see this already, when it comes to, for example, pre-epigenetic understandings of disease. And, now people are having an understanding of, like it's not fixed. So I'd love to hear your view on this as it pertains to medical astrology.
Well, thank you. That's just a wonderful question. I'm always aware of this in my writing, and people who are overly easily suggestible, should probably stay away from medical astrology so you don't give yourself diseases. So we all have predispositions towards things from our genetic heritage, our karma, and then we push them along with our lifestyle. Now, I myself have healed myself of two very major illnesses that no one thought I could, actually three, using astrology and herbs. So it took a long time to do so, but I have done so. If you have a predisposition and matching symptoms, then you would do otherwise and seek to heal or change this condition. And now you can, what the chart will do for you is give you a lot of leads as to what the seat of the problem is. Should the herbs be hot or cold? Is this really of supernatural origin? Is this, it gives you a lot of information to help you with the healing process. And there also are series of remedials. So it's fatalistic only in the way anything is. In other words, you're born in a body, and the body has its little idiosyncrasies, just like your pet does. You have a dog, and this dog gets hip dysplasia. Well, some humans break down their hips. Most of my friends have, but some haven't. And you can see the tendency. So you start young, you start working on the nutrients that help with hips and exercises, and maybe they get to 50 and they won't need the hip replacement. You see, that's called preemptive. So I consider it very, very useful. The misuse would be to say, oh my goodness, I've got Saturn in Cancer. I am going to get this horrible disease of those organs. That would be a complete misuse of astrology. Just like doctors can sometimes say, "Oh, you've just got 2 weeks to live," and one person will hear that and drop dead, and another person says, "I'm not listening to that," and they're alive 5 years later. So you have to do your own thinking.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that, because I think people can really get in a tizzy with some of this stuff,
Oh
especially if
yes.
they're already dealing with so much and their nervous systems are a bit delicate, and maybe they have been dealing with chronic illness or disease. And I kind of want to get back to you mentioned Saturn as sort of the key to chronic disease when we're looking at our charts. And then you briefly touched on Mars. So Mars, what's Mars got to do with it? What's the influence that Mars has upon us?
Well, Mars and Saturn were known as the two malefics because they cause so much trouble, but they also govern strength and muscles, and where there are great friends and allies too. But Mars is the opposite of Saturn in one particular way. He's very, very hot. Saturn is very cold. So Mars throws everything outwards. It's interesting, he throws off his own atmosphere. He throws everything out of the body. He penetrates. He has the symbol that you see in bathroom stalls for men. That's Mars's symbol. So he penetrates from the inside out, and he penetrates from the outside in. So he rules bacterial invasion, cuts, wounds, accidents. He rules fever. He rules inflammation, and he also rules diaphoresis, diuresis. He gets sweat, urine, everything going out of the body. Semen, he throws things out of the body. So he's very important. What would we do without Mars? He also governs the red and, I think, white blood cells because he's our defender and attacker. But when he's attacking you, that's not so nice. So you will often find the sign he is in will be a place where a person has had surgery or a scar or an accident or a great deal of inflammation. And he's much worse in some signs than others. But he also gives muscular strength, and Saturn gives skeletal strength. So never think of anything in astrology as all just one way. Things are good for certain things, and they're bad or difficult for others.
Speaking of Mars, I was curious. I brought up my own chart because I was like, let me check to see where Mars is hanging out in my chart. And I'm finding Mars in Gemini. And from what I remember, that you speaking to sort of the bronchial
Oh, yeah.
area,
Yeah.
right? Upper lungs. Would that relate? I had childhood asthma that,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
So hot, you'd have, so the thing, like you Chinese herbalists out there, there's hot asthma and there's cold asthma. This would be, I haven't seen the whole chart, so this is hypothetical, Vanessa, but it would, just that one indicator would hint of a dry, hot lungs with not enough protective moisture. So you need to stay away from those big fires. Or to use the moistening. This is what some people do. I cannot diagnose on a show. The moistening approach, moisten demulcent approach to your situation. So there'd be hot inflammation. If Saturn was in Gemini, it would be cold constriction, trapped moisture, or dryness. Either way. And Mars always goes
Mm-hmm.
dry in Gemini.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even thinking back to my childhood, I remember it used to keep me up. I'd have these dry coughs. It was terrible. But that has since resolved. And so, in speaking to what you were saying with the ability for us to really look at these and to utilize it to make shifts in our own lives, I think is really empowering. So seeing this as an empowerment tool and science versus that sort of fatalistic woe is me, I have a crappy chart, and that we can really take a lot of this into our own hands and bring some preventative measures, if not if it hasn't already manifested.
Well, may I give a living example that we all can relate to? I noticed this right off. Bernie Sanders has Mars in Aries, the sign of the head, and he has it with his moon, making it, his moon is his emotions, even much more kicked up a notch. Apparently, his true birth chart is unknown. We do not know what his rising is, but Mars and moon in Aries. And I always noticed that means head, right, and Mars pushes things to the surface. Head, it pushes heat to the periphery. So people with a strong Mars in Aries can actually get hypothermia, but it means the person's got a lot, they're hot-headed. And I noticed he was always, till he got the new medicine, he was always red-faced, red palms, and yelling. And I thought, this guy, and I told many people, I said, he's going to have a stroke or a heart attack any day because of his age and because of this situation in Aries. And the symptoms I was seeing, the red palms, the bright red face, the always yelling. And sure enough, he had a sudden heart attack. So it's the reason he's a living example is just look at him. The Mars, Moon, and Aries is so visible when he speaks, especially in the earlier days, because now Matthew told me he's taking a medicine which keeps the redness from happening after he had the heart attack. So this is a living example. And I would personally love to have a little talk with him because transit Mars in Aries is going to come through and potentize that for 6 months this year.
Uh-oh,
And
Bernie.
I would like to sit him down and say, look, you need to cool this off right now. But of course I won't. I mean, no one will invite me. So yeah.
Yeah, and even so, I feel like if things are a bit hot-headed, they may not heed your advice either way.
No, that's just it. Leos generally, the sign Leo generally will not take advice unless they're pampered by the nurses. Yeah, some signs just they will go on doing what they're doing.
Yeah, and thank goodness for them.
We all need them. We need everybody. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the heat and the hotness, I feel like kind of on the, I don't know if it's the opposite end of the spectrum, but something that it is definitely coming into the consciousness of more and more people is the waters of the moon and sort of the moon cycles. And there's a lot of discussion around moon time and syncing in with moons and different moon phases and full moon and new moon circles and all that wonderful stuff. How does the moon play a role in medical astrology?
Oh, it's huge. It's absolutely huge, especially in timing. And my book, Astrology and Your Vital Force, is a huge section, 2 chapters on the moon on every possible angle. But if you want to make medicines that are hot, you use fire signs. Or you want to make medicines that are going to be used for excretion or better red blood cells or muscles, you use the moon when she's exactly conjunct Mars in the sky. If you want cold or wet, moistening, demulcent remedies, you use the moon in water signs. This goes all the way back. You read about it in Walgrave's diary in the 1600s, and he's late in the game. So then you have your full and new moons. Okay, so you want to add to the body on the waxing moon. That means, your nutrition, your surgeries that add things that must stick. You want to get rid of things when the moon is waning. You do your vermifuges, your parasite purges. You remove cancerous cells or bad teeth. You rest. Uh, Now, the moon is very, very important. You do not go in and have surgery on an eclipse. I still cannot believe that with everything they do know, they still do this, or full moons. They all know hemorrhages happen more at full moon. Uh, there's also certain signs that are important. So in the old days, every barbershop, which is where the surgeons were, they were the same person, believe it or not. They had a chart that showed zodiacal man, so that you knew what sign the moon was in every day, and you would not cut with iron. Now, you don't cut with iron, say, the hand when the moon is going through Gemini, because it rules the hand. Why? When the moon, you can observe this yourself, just get a diary. When the moon goes through a sign, she pulls slightly more fluid and electrical current to that body part. It becomes more sensitive and more prone to bleeding. If it's near a full moon, it's going to be very, very marked. Now, why is it okay to nutrify that area? Well, if there's no engorgement or impactions, and you want to give nutritive remedies or vitamin C or whatever, and you want it, or remedy for the eyes, you can. It's best to do it at that time because the blood is flowing there more, just a little more. The moon is attending to that body zone. And it's even nicer to use the signs of the same element. But again, you don't nutrify an area when the moon is going through that sign if it is engorged or swelling. The moon brings fluid. So this is so important, these little things. I have a lecture which they sell at Norwalk from last year on the 12 things every healer should know. And that one goes into some of this with the moon as well. And I also have an audio on my audio shop on moon lore, which just covers all kinds of interesting things you want to know astrologically about the moon.
Well, today, at the time of this recording, it is a full moon in Virgo, right? And
Perfect.
so I'm curious today, for those who are like, uh-oh, what's going on? What am I doing today? Well, at the time that you're listening to this, it's way gone and past. But I'm thinking for today, I have someone that's dear to me who also has their moon in Virgo. And if I remember correctly, Virgo kind of ruling the upper gastrointestinal, right, regions. And they're having some pretty big issues with digestive upset. Would that be due to something like that?
Yeah, if you're having digestive upsets or liver or gallbladder or all of that, upper digestion organs, and it's a full moon in Virgo, that's when it comes to full bloom. There's more pressure. So that would be a good day probably to fast. And the days on either side, a full moon has a 48 buildup and a reduction on each side, 48 hours, but definitely 24. And I had a friend who always got nauseous every month on the Virgo moon. She's one of my field notes. Now, it also is the sun is in Pisces. On a full moon, the moon stands opposite the sun. So Pisces, the lymphatic system, and the feet are also more affected. than in a normal full moon, as is the sleep. So people either get insomnia or they sleep too much on a full moon in Virgo or Pisces.
Well, I definitely know folks who come to me as a nutritionist, that are dealing with digestive issues, upsets. I hear this a lot, that they feel worse on full moons. Some I feel in their tracking that it's also related to new moon. I don't know how that might manifest for them. But I initially was thinking, oh, I wonder if there's some parasitic stuff going on there. But it sounds like just in general, simply having the full moon, if there's already a predisposition of some digestive issues there, that could be amplified.
Yeah, no, that's true. And, this is just an excellent discussion because how can you use this information? So you can use it in so many ways. Say you had a person in the hospital and with this full moon, and they were there for, they had their appendix removed or something. Should you release them on a full moon in Virgo? No, it's the day there's most likely to be complications. So you don't do that, and might even wait an extra day. It would it be a day when something hiding would bloom? Yes. Yes. So you prepare for it. It's in one of the fasting moons because of this. Not known. You're not supposed to give medicines on any Earth sign moon because there's a greater predisposition to vomit. This is a very ancient rule, observed many times. So there's many, many ways you can use this. Or do you want to do an onset of a medicine for a hepatitis C case when the full moon is in Virgo? No, it would have the most dramatic, too much energy to the area. Too much, the full moon brings a swelling. So it can be used. It's good to know these things. That's why doctors did know these things until it was, basically banned and pushed underground in the late 1600s.
Mm-hmm.
Early 1700s, really.
Well, there's so much here on the topic of digestion. Even I would love to touch briefly on nutrition. I mean, and this is also
Mm,
for me as a nutritionist.
yeah.
I'm always thinking about this, but if there's any correlations with nutrition and diet as it relates to medical astrology and one's chart or their particular constitution, how would we look at that?
Well, Vanessa, this is a very important branch of astrology. I kind of gave it a name, astronutrition. There are two great pioneers in this field, Robert Karl Jansky, and let me see, I always mix her up. There's two authors with very similar names. It's Eileen Naumann. Her book is the tome on astronutrition. And both of these authors have outlined what vitamins and minerals go with each planet. The metals are historic. We've always known, iron went with Mars and copper with Venus since ancient times. But these people have taken, they say, iodine is the sun, and potassium is the moon, and, phosphorus, the moon, magnesium, and so forth. They have it all outlined. So you can look at a natal chart for predisposition of nutritional deficiencies and then give them more. You can look at the transits, what's happening now. So Saturn again is crossing your Venus. We used this example earlier. You might need more vitamin E, as well as estrogen and other nutrients ruled by Venus. So both in timing, Saturn always shuts everything down. So Vanessa, you should look at your chart right now and see if Saturn is particularly conjunct something that's sitting on top of it in your natal chart. It could also be, for you more advanced, opposed it, quincunx or square. And you supply those vitamins and minerals if the symptoms suggest. And again, this is what some people do. I'm not telling you to do it. You always have to go to your doctor, right? So it's an incredible field, very, very useful. I've done it a little bit with my own, experiments, but I'm not a nutritionist myself. But for a nutritionist, it's invaluable.
Yeah, I see myself going down the rabbit hole this week, Judith, not gonna lie. I look at Saturn. So for just kind of circling back to your quick reference, Saturn in my chart is in Libra right next to Pluto, both in Libra. I'm not sure if that would indicate or relate to anything there.
Yeah, now your whole generation would have had it next to Pluto off and on. It's a very slow one. But Saturn in Libra, this is traditional, and the great medical astrologer Davidson talked about this, is famous for getting an accumulation of tiny gravel in the kidneys over time, which the symptom is headaches or lumbar back pain. It may not do that in your case, of course, but you want to, would be some kind of Saturnian effect, often at some point in the life, in the lumbar spine, the kidneys, sometimes ovaries too. So you want to, again, bring more circulation, bring more oxygen if you have symptoms that relate to this. It can be a structural issue like a subluxation. You want to be very attentive to balances of all things.
Well, this is resonating 1,000%. I've always had issues with low back, also hip area, but I think in more recent times, which admittedly I'd been more sedentary with work, and sitting at the computer and stuff. So issues with circulation too throughout my life. But there definitely has been an increase in that area. And I intuitively, like when I've done my own Akashic reading, I haven't been shown my kidneys, but I've been shown my ovaries. So, and I didn't know that was related to Libras as
yes,
well.
most books do not include that, but the ovaries, and Libra has governance over the kidneys and the ovaries shared with Venus, and possibly has some influence over the testes. I'm still working with that, blended with Scorpio.
Yeah, so I think it was a few years ago when that came to me and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So, I started doing some work there. But in more recent times, I noticed that if I do get off balance, off kilter with what feels good for me in terms of diet, I do notice that area flares for me. So something to keep in mind for myself.
Well, if you look at this energetically, so you have cold and hardening. Cold, hard, it's drying, it traps. So the antidotes, traditional, you have many choices. It depends on the rest of the chart. So you could either go warming and relaxing would be an antidote, or you might go, it could be you need a little, let's say, actually Saturn stands opposite in nature to every single planet. So you may need more blood flow. You may need something to keep the tissue from hardening. You may need some grout to get gravel out of there. We have so many tiny tubes. I think you can, what is it, that old thing, why do they always say a football field? But fill a football field with these tiny tubes in the kidneys. So they can host a lot of tiny matter. And so you also want to see if your lumbar spine is responsible for your hip issues. Your chart will tell you if the problem is really with the lumbar.
Well, Judith, I think I'm going to have a separate reading with you. And maybe I'll report back, since I think that there's so much that we could get into. And I encourage folks, you are still doing readings, correct?
Well, I legally, I call them lessons. And my clients sign a waiver saying they understand that they're having a lesson in medical astrology using their chart as our hypothetical example for historic purposes and wonderment, and that they are to go to their physician for any authoritative diagnosis or prescription.
Well, I appreciate that on so many levels, Judith, because I do feel like it's a lesson. I feel like this work is to empower the client, the person who's sitting there, so that they can really understand themselves better. So I actually like that better.
Yeah, I'm very, very careful and about what I can and cannot do. And the other thing, I am booking in August right now, but I am taking probably fertility cases. I do a lot of astrofertility for women who can't seem to get pregnant and I do date selections. I am taking some cases in April, most likely. So I just wanted to put that out there, that there is a waiting period to see me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
I always get mobbed, and then it's like, well, it's August. And,
right, totally. Well, it's well worth the wait. And I know so many fertility cases. That's something else that seems to be on the rise. Or maybe it's
yes.
just me as a health practitioner, but yeah, you're seeing it too, that there's just this rise in fertility challenges.
Well, only with Caucasian women. It's apparently at 1/4 all around the world, and nobody knows why. And I have a theory. I'm thinking for some reason Caucasians might be more sensitive to EMF fields
Mm.
uh, or something, but there is a problem, even in Russia, very, very, very high infertility. And I don't know if it's rising with other ethnicities or not, but it is very high, and among males also. So what I have found is over and over and over again, if the couple is otherwise healthy, and it isn't a couple incompatibility. There's all these cases where nothing's wrong with either one, but the woman is rejecting her partner for some reason, and she has an affair and instantly gets pregnant. And you can see that, there's just no connection between the couple. That happens. But over and over and over again, I've probably had, 90% success at people becoming pregnant. And I use the Jonas method and also my own method. They had a clinic. Oh, this will fascinate your listeners. There was a clinic that ran for 11 years in Czechoslovakia with Dr. Eugen Jonas. And it was a fertility clinic using only astrology. They had 80% success getting infertile women pregnant and 80% success the women getting the gender they preferred. I've had the same level, if not higher. And there's a whole book called Astrological Birth Control about this clinic. It's now closed. And they made some fascinating discoveries, one of which women do not ovulate just once a month. They can ovulate by surprise under special stimuli. Sure enough, one of my clients got pregnant right on her period. This does happen. Doctors notice it and they choose not to notice it because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't fit in with the prescribed. But you will have a period every month in your chart, once a month, that you're highly fertile for this. What Dr. Jonas found in 11 years was that a woman is much more likely to get pregnant on her astrological fertility moment than she is on her ovulation time, because the astrology acts as it's a special stimulus, as much as some gorgeous man might be suddenly out of the blue. So your body's perfectly capable of facilitating nature and getting pregnant when it's not supposed to. And so this is important, and I have used it, and time and time and time and time again, the woman is pregnant. Often just happened with my apprentice. I gave him a date. She got pregnant on the date. Got lots of stories like that.
This is pretty mind blowing. But it makes so much sense. I know that I have had friends and families and clients who have definitely gotten pregnant by surprise, thinking that they weren't ovulating. And then they feel as though, not that, for some of them, it was not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing or anything like that, but just in terms of surprise and feeling like, man, I thought that I was charting and that I knew these various phases of my body. And here there's this surprise that comes through. Is that something that you have seen just more on a practical level? Like, would that show up, for example, if somebody is tracking their basal temperature, that astrological event, would that sort of impact the physiology where they could actually track it and see and prevent it if they were trying to prevent it or try to get pregnant at that time?
Well, I never seen anybody. I'm sure they did it at the Jonas Clinic. Actually, use the temperature with astrology. What I just do is here's the astrology. I have them give me their ovulation dates, and I look at those, and then what they think is going to happen, and then I use the astrology. So I haven't myself tracked that, but the astrology seems to work just fine. And I imagine if they did track it, they would find a correlation. We're made out of sunlight. We are. We're made out of photons. Everything is made out of sunlight. This is why I'm always astonished when people say, I don't believe in sun signs, or I don't believe in astrology. Well, they don't realize that what a sun sign in the West really is. It is a a very definite 30-day season every year. It has not moved backwards due to a precession of the equinoxes. The first beginning of our zodiac is the spring equinox. So that's a certain Earth-Sun, the Earth is tilted a certain way, a certain Earth-Sun relationship. So every 30 days, and every day, there's an exact, precise Earth-Sun relationship. So if you're a Taurus, you're born 30 days after the spring equinox, and that season goes for 30 days until we come to Gemini. That's been the same for billions of years. So we're made out of, you're born at a time when those light particles and those exact vibrations are what is informing every single thing in our physical universe. What would happen if the sun didn't rise? So when people say, I don't believe in astrology, it's sort of like saying, I don't believe in philosophy. So find out what you don't believe in, and then let's have a talk. I'm completely happy talking with people who studied the subject.
I love it. Yeah. And I'll send skeptics your way, Judith, so you could school them. No, but one teacher of mine, her name is Deanna Minnick. She's another nutritionist, a PhD nutritionist, and she's all about light as it relates to nutrition as well. And seeing ourselves in that way, I can't wait to share some of the insights that you've shared with us as it relates to astronutrition, because I think that there's so much there that can be really helpful. And this is also the blending of science, with sort of like these quote alternative methods that people are utilizing. I think that we're coming at an age where all of that is being bridged back together. I think that it's been so discombobulated.
Well, I have a book that I wasn't edited. I'm not that proud of that, but it's my wild, crazy book, and it's called Astrology and Your Vital Force: Healing with Cosmic Rays and DNA Resonance. And it's a compendium of all these unusual frequency vibrational light remedies, including the gem system of India that we use for astrological remedials. And it is a wild, crazy book. Please excuse the typos. It's not as professionally done as my other books. It looks like it's just right off my desk, but it has everything in it. It's just and some of the science and discoveries of Burl Payne and Arthur Young and everything. Really fascinating stuff.
Is that available on your website?
Oh, they can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the American Federation of Astrologers has it. New Renaissance Bookstore has it in Portland. Not always in stock. Abe Books. If you don't like Amazon, there's a lot of places. Astrology and Your Vital Force.
So widely available. I'm writing that one down. I'm getting it after our call.
and if you like I have a book, The Astrological Body Types, which is an old Dave's Top 10 classic, and it goes into the elemental, modal, planetary, and sign body types and what they look like, because people do also, the body will look different with different horoscopes, and how that works and how that happens. And I did all the illustrations.
Well, just a quick side story on that. When I was teaching over at Hawthorne Institute here in Williams, Oregon, I had some students who are, budding astrologers and incorporating it into their herbalism work. And they were sizing up each teacher and trying to guess our signs, and map out our chart. And I can't tell you, Judith, they were on point. They guessed correctly my sun, moon, rising, and my Mercury.
Whoa.
Yes. It was so amazing. And I was just thrilled to hear that one of the resources they used was your book, of course. But just how applicable it was astonishing.
Yeah, the finely tuned can do this. Beginners are better at that, because when you know too much, you start going, well, that tip of that nose is Scorpio, but they're acting like a Gemini, and you get way too complex. It's the beginners just right off guess you. It's hysterical. I always find that true.
Yeah, well, that's how I feel about nutrition. I feel like I know too much, and it's just like you go down the rabbit hole with it.
You get your own way.
Yes. Last thing I did want to touch on, and I really appreciate you hanging on with us, because this is just, this material is so amazing. I know everybody is just like eating it all up. So thank you for hanging in there with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
I did want to kind of circle back to public health and health trends. And,
Yeah.
astrology, as you have noted, and in your books, you talk about in this way that it's excellent at predicting public health trends as well as individual. And in light of this year's public health concern, so right now we're in the beginning of March 2020, so the coronavirus is going wild in media and otherwise. And I'm curious if you're open to sharing your take from sort of an astrological perspective on COVID-19 and yeah, anything there.
Oh, well, okay. Well, not to be vainglorious, but Matthew Wood keeps reminding me that I predicted this to the day. And I don't remember having done that, but I apparently told him about it, that it was going to be a big plague starting at that eclipse in late December and last for some time. Now, my hit is that it started on an eclipse. Now I have a book called Eclipses in You that goes into the health impact of every eclipse. So this is in the Capricorn Cancer eclipses we're having, and we had one at the end of December on the 25th in America, and another a very powerful one. It was on the 10th of January. And so these seem to be related to this coronavirus going around. And so you wait till they're triggered, and the main trigger is yet ahead of us. It's going to be somewhere between there's two of them, the 15th and the 19th of this month. So probably be looking around the 16th, 17th, 18th for news on if if it doesn't explode a great deal at that point, we're probably safe because eclipses will wear themselves out. It's either going to go crazy then or it's gonna not. If it doesn't, we're lucky. There's another little trigger on the new moon. The new moon will exactly square, for you astrologers, 90 degrees, the eclipse in December that began it all. And that new moon is the 24th of March in the US, it looks like. So a day on either side. And so we see that, you take that and you take it forward maybe a week. And there's another little time here around the 12th or 13th, 14th of April. The full moon in April triggers the second eclipse. So that's on the 7th in the US. So take the 7th through the 14th as another trigger. So those are the points we have to get through. As Jupiter hit the degree of the eclipse on March 3rd, it was announced that there was the explosion of it in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
So only 9 cases. So we still have several doozy triggers. If there's no action on those dates, that's a very good thing. If it hasn't run its course, it's likely to go wild at those times. So let's all hope it doesn't. And I know that Deborah Francis, whose name is also Beautiful Little Dancing Crow, she sent out a big post. She's a major herbalist and RN, and they're doing a major ceremonies. They're trying to get many people involved to keep the coronavirus from going wild. They're doing a bowl of water ceremony where I don't know what they do with it, but they described it. You might want to look up Deborah Francis or Beautiful Little Dancing Crow and the ceremony about the coronavirus and see if you can get information, because they wanted healers to participate all over the place. Because we can't just sit here and go, duh. Humans have an amazing amount of thought power, mind power, heart power, and this is a being. This is a little entity, which we're calling. It has a pretty name, doesn't it?
It does.
Corona.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds just lovely. Anyway, it isn't lovely. So we can do some things, but these trigger dates are of interest. I'm watching them with great scrutiny.
Wow, yes. And all of the dates that you're touching on. So this will be published most likely on the 23rd. So we are speaking to this upcoming week as one of the weeks to watch, correct?
Yeah, the worst day would be, I need my little book, but it's the day that Mars joins the moon in Capricorn. I think that's going to be the 17th. Let me see here, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, that will be on the 17th.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be so the day on either side, you always do that, would be our first really, really serious trigger. And then the second would be on the 24th, a day on either side of March. And then the next is, around that. There's 2 triggers in April. And then it's starting to possibly wear itself out, let's hope. So that's on the full moon. That's on that eclipse point. So that again will be so it says here it's the 7th in the US. And so I would say the 6th or 7th. And you take that out through at least the 14th.
Mm-hmm.
There's another little day of concern around the 21st or 22nd of April. So we're going to just watch the news and see what happens. I do think they're going to be shutting down some airports, and I'll tell you why. Saturn and Mars, both malefics, will be entering the air sign Aquarius. Saturn enters on March 21st. Mars enters on the 30th of March. They will be in Aquarius together through mid-May. That's 2 malefics in the sign of airports and air flights. I'm thinking there's a good chance of some very strict restrictions on air flight travel. Let's, again, hope not. You don't let astrology rule you. You use your mind to do what you need when you see this. It's just like seismology. It's no different, or a weather report.
Mm-hmm.
So if you saw there's going to be a hurricane coming, you batten down the hatches and get in the basement.
Right.
So you can do things. Or if it was just going to be a minor storm, you trim the trees and you shutter the windows and have a nice sleep, or start a fish farm. You can always do things with something. I'm not letting myself get overly worried. I do think there's a lot of hysteria.
Yeah.
100 people apparently died of a flu, of the regular influenza, in one city, while 6 people died in the hospital of corona because the people with the flu couldn't get into the hospital.
Oh my goodness.
It was one of these. It was either Hong Kong. I saw it on the documentary on TV, and I can't remember the city.
It's so amazing to see just all the different layers that, like, what's coming up and out because of this, especially related to fear and the pervasiveness there. I'm curious, as you were saying, that Matthew had mentioned that you predicted it and sort of, connected to a plague-like event. What are some of the things that you're looking at? I mean, if it's sort of simple to explain, I know there could
Well,
be.
yeah. Oh, this is I've been telling people for 10, 20 years that 2020 was the big year where the greatest difficulties were shown astrologically for the planet and governments and finances and everything. I didn't know what it would be. It could have been a collapse of the dollar. It could have been the icebergs melting. It could have been a massive earthquake. It could have been a great plague, which, although this is certainly not the Black Death, but it seems to be shutting down economies and making our prices go up and everything, and shutting down factories and travel. So it's pretty big. And the reason I said that is not only do we have a joining of Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, and Mars all in one sign, but we're having them with eclipses going through that same sign, and it's the negative pole of the eclipses, the south node. And one of the only astrologers who's ever brought out this effect of that eclipses are of 2 types, south node and north node, incoming energy or outgoing energy. So south node is things being very difficult or hard to solve and dumping out. Like I warn people to get out of the stock market, get out of the stock market. It was going to go way up and then it's going to go way down because of this. Don't take my advice. I'm not very good at finances, but it did happen with this scare. I always say I know about as much as a turtle at the zoo about money, or I wouldn't be in this field. It's just so obvious that we have a buildup, a mass of planets on the most possible difficult eclipse point, the south node, that has occurred since I've been alive. And Capricorn is the sign governing the world axis. So we're seeing many, many, many things that are occurring at this time. And so we have to all, it's all hands on deck. Plant a tree. We're losing our trees. I just tell people plant trees, especially fruit and nut trees. We're losing our trees all over the planet. Do what you can so that there'll be enough. A butterfly flapping its wings on one side of the earth really can create a storm on the other side of the earth if you know how vibration works. So you can do a lot as one person. Don't think otherwise.
Yeah, it's so powerful. In a group program that I'm leading, we have some power circles for intention and prayers.
Yeah.
And so weekly we'll sending out prayers for that, and just the incredible, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast episode. I'm interviewing somebody else on the power of groups and intention and prayer.
Mhm.
But yeah, thank you for speaking into that. And just sort of a little bit detailed around the COVID-19 and how it sort of impacts the lower respiratory
Mhm.
area. I was just curious if there is anything there that might be related or seen in the medical
Well, the
astrology
the
lens.
lower lung is governed by the sign Cancer, and that is a sign that's involved in this eclipses. Eclipses are always bipolar, so Cancer rules the lower lung, and Saturn and Jupiter are opposing it, meaning the lower lung isn't getting enough energy anyway. So one of the symptoms is they can't seem to get it out of the lower lung, and it's shutting down the lower lung. So I've been in two big councils with advanced worldwide herbalists, and the idea is to want to keep the person, don't allow constipation, but they're talking about herbs and things to open up and that lower lung so it doesn't shut down.
Mm,
So I know that the Chinese, I'm not going to go into details of it, but I know that the Chinese have discovered that the aromatic herbs and stimulants are useful.
yes. Oh, I can imagine. And I'm sure for prevention as well.
Well, I'm going to suggest, something some people do. I'm not telling anybody to do this, but I just bought one. Edgar Cayce had a remedy for emphysema and also used in tuberculosis and other types of these diseases. And it's apple brandy sniffed through a charred oak keg. He was the great medical psychic, and it was apparently very healing to the lungs. Now, in emphysema, they're all choked and shutting down. And so I went and got myself a charred oat cake and some apple brandy, and I'm going to be fortifying and strengthening my lungs. It might be very useful if a person just gets the virus, but it's yet to be seen. There's no experiment whatsoever. I'm not an authority on that. Let it be clear. But yeah, so Cancer, if we looked at a horoscope right now, the sign Cancer isn't getting a lot of vital force because Saturn is opposite it, Jupiter's opposite it. So the two big time clocks are opposite it. Mars, energy, opposite it. So the whole problem seems to be this getting stuck in the lower lungs. They can't seem to get it out. That's the hospitals who aren't using the methods of, I've heard they're having good success with the traditional Chinese herbals and that approach. I don't know what you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing so much information being circulated, and I think that nobody really knows, and everybody is testing and just trying to support their immune systems as much as possible, and prevention is the best medicine. But I'm really looking forward to see what comes out of China as it relates to the traditional Chinese medicine perspective, because I think there's just so much more of a holistic lens being seen, especially through constitutions and energetics and all of that, and with herbs. And that, I think, in allopathic Western medicine, there seems to be a lot of fear around using natural methods like that.
Yeah, it's funny. They got that same bug about everything previous to modern is nonsense, I think, though they are more open to it than here. Yeah, the historic roots of that paradigm are very interesting. So yeah, I'm following it, but they say it's mostly middle-aged men and people over 60 that have to really worry. I haven't looked at the statistics though.
Well, you just gave us a pretty spectacular insight into, how we can really utilize medical astrology in general to map out and sort of watch these trends inside and out at the individual micro level and the macro level. I think that, this your work and astrology in general is such a beautiful pathway to this understanding that of interconnectedness, and just like how as above so below, as within so without. So I really appreciate your work and your insight and your perspective on all this, Judith. And for you coming on and sharing your time. This is probably one of our longest podcasts, and I'm so glad that you decided to sit in with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. This is just really fun for me. It was thrilling and fun, and your questions were just excellent, and I really appreciate that. And they were fun to answer and provocative, and hopefully your audience was just as fascinated as I was in these questions. So I am so happy you had me on, and I hope that your audience has enjoyed this as well, and you are just a wonderful interviewer. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And Judith, we cannot let you go unless you answer this one question we ask everybody who comes on. And I'm really interested to hear, what is feeding your wild right now? So whether that's body, mind, soul, or beyond, feeding your wild.
Well, I just love to sing. And I've been in a little bluegrass circle, which has been just very delightful. But I've been singing every kind of music, and doo-wop and Motown, and things that have beautiful high vibration, beautiful lyrics, beautiful melodies. Just makes me feel so good. And I'm also mad passionate about herbs and learning to hear them and talk to them and feel them as beings. And the plant kingdom gives me great joy. I go out, and people probably think I'm a real nut because they'll see me kind of talking to a flower or patting a tree.
Not
But
in
it's
this
good to be a nut
crowd.
sometimes. Yeah, it's good to be a nut. And I always remember what Rob Hand said in an old lecture: spend one day calling everything you see thou and see what happens. And that's my approach to life. And that's what makes me tick.
I
So when I
love
meet a cat,
that.
I say, hello, thou, and how's your day? And I treat it like a being, and they always go, what? They look up, they know what you're doing, and they catch that they're being treated as a being. And trees have the same response, and it's a little harder to hear it. But yeah, practice saying hello to all life and getting off your screens for 2 days a week. That's what I do.
Oh, I think that we definitely can use that now more than
E-Sabbath.
ever.
I call
Yes.
it an e-Sabbath, and I go out, you handle things, you smell, you cook, you dance, you sing. Exercise your other senses and remain a real human being, because these things are trying to shut us down a little too. And so everything to open up your heart and keep your heart alive, keep your senses alive. Balanced living. That's that Saturn and Libra for you, Vanessa, balanced living.
Oh, don't I know it? Constant reminder. Well, thank you,
So
Judith. I
what I'm going to
know.
do,
Yeah, tell me.
I'm going to go out, and it's a sunny day and take a big hike in the sun. And that's what I do to balance myself today after being on computer.
Well, I'm gonna have to join you from afar and go out and enjoy this sun that I'm experiencing over here in Southern Oregon. I know that so many of our listeners are going to want to learn more. We already threw out some links, some book names, and some conference, but I want to leave space here right now for you to drop anything else that you would like and how people can best connect with you.
Oh, okay. I should mention I have a 12-module self-study course called Medical Astrology 101. And it was done several years ago. It's very low screen, and it uses all four senses. I do not interact with students because it's very low cost unless they're going for the certificate. So that's on my website. And again, I'll be doing a workshop at NORWAC in late May. That is open, even though the conference may say closed, but still call her in case of cancellations. I will be speaking down at International Astrology Day in about 2 weeks on a medical astrology topic. Again, I just want to let you know I've got all level of books out there. So medical astrology for health practitioners is the healer's guide the layman's prequel to my other books. There's medical astrology, a guide to planetary pathology. That's my main book for all levels. It has a lot on surgery dates, probably the best section written ever, most thorough on how to select a safe surgery date, but much, much, much else. It's A to Z. Then again, for the advanced or for the practitioner, medical astrology in action, the transits of health, and also for collective health trends, eclipses and you. Gives a lot on the eclipses and their collective health trends. So those are some, I've many books, but those are ones in the astrological body types, of course, that are more pertinent to our topic today on medical astrology. And many of them have herbal, if you want herbal notes and field notes, the medical astrology in action, weird remedials of all kinds and how to use the moon, astrology and your vital force. So there's the differences. And anyway, I hope I'm not taking too much time.
No,
But
this
it's
is
been so
perfect.
great.
Yes. Oh, Judith, thank you for your dedication and your prolific commitment to astrology and everything that you just mentioned. We really appreciate you coming on, and I hope that you have a blessed rest of your full moon and beyond. And yeah, and hopefully maybe in the future we could get you on to get into the nitty gritty of one of the 1,000 topics that we touched on today.
Well, I wanted to say, in case people should know this, I spent 10 years in the statistical research of astrology with the help of scientists, proving to my satisfaction that astrology is very real indeed. So I also have a science background in, doing very rigorous statistical studies and control groups and populations and data points. And I don't do that anymore. It drove me nuts. But I did, to my full satisfaction, prove that it works over and over and over again if the study is organized correctly. And that is important to know because a lot of the studies have been organized to trick astrologers. And it's very easy if you know how to organize studies to see that they're designed to make astrology fail. But when you do them the right way, they usually don't fail. So we can no longer say that there's also many other studies by many researchers now since the 1950s, starting with the Gauquelins and with Frau Lily Kalisko and way back with Steiner. She worked with him, that have proved over and over again that astral influences of the planets work. They're real. So nobody can keep running around saying there's no scientific proof. There's lots and lots of it. And I just wanted to get that out there because you continually hear that parroted about. So many good studies. It's amazing. There's a book called Metal Power by Nick Kollerstrom. You want to see photographs of astrology at work with cell salts at moon conjunctions? That's the book to see. I believe it's Metal Power, Nick Kollerstrom. I believe that's the name of the book. My memory sometimes. So, okay, I wanted to make sure people knew about that in that particular book. If you want a Renaissance diary of how they did this system in Renaissance times, Blaugrave's Physic, put out by the Astrology Center of America, their astrological classics division. It is a Renaissance medical astrologer, herbalist's diary. It's an amazing, incredible, wild, crazy book. It changed my life. So there's some good stuff for your folks out there. And thank you for listening, everybody. And thank you, Vanessa, again.
So amazing. Thank you, Judith. And again, we will have all of those amazing resources in the show notes. And we would love to hear from all of you. If you are on Instagram, I'm over at Wildly Rooted. We also have a private Facebook group just for the podcast that will continue this conversation over there. So I know there's lots of questions and juicy tidbits that everyone would like to dive into. So make sure you continue the conversation. And again, Judith, I'm just so blessed. So thanks again. And yeah, everybody dive in.
Well, you're welcome. And I am mutually blessed to be able to have a venue to spread the word, which is my life work. So thank you, Vanessa, for providing this resource.
Hey there, I made something for you. One of the biggest challenges that I hear from people is that they are feeling stuck when it comes to their health. You're a smart, capable, and creative change maker, right? And you know what you should be doing for your health. So what gives? Well, it's not about willpower. And I wanted to create something that would help you to unlearn the things that are keeping you stuck so that you can get out of your own way and master the mindset of health. That's why I created Wildly Unstuck, where you'll learn the top 5 things that I have found to sabotage your health goals and what to do about them. You'll learn what it really takes to become committed and unstoppable when it comes to your health goals, and find the clarity you've been looking for so you know exactly what to do to get back into alignment. And I made it totally free. So if this is something that you want to dive into and create a vision and soul goals for your health and your life and bring your gifts to the world, because we know that we need it, then I invite you to join us in Wildly Unstuck. You can find that at wildlyrooted.com/unstuck. I'll see you on the other side.